Hello, Djamila. I'm so pleased that you said yes to this. I got interested in what's happening to Reiner. Actually, interested is too cold a word. I cared, and therefore I started posting. A number of other people did. You're one of those people. Then you were with Kirsten Heisinger, then there was Claudia Jaworski.
Yeah.
Arne Schmidt came to all the meetings that he was always coming out of the courthouse. And so I am really interested in what makes people not just care privately when they hear about it, but take some action. So I'd love to know if you could do it. Going back to childhood, were you always, did you pay attention to politics? Did you give to charity? Did you care about homeless children? Did you care about world hunger? Like, where did you get started way back then?
Well, first of all, thank you, Elsa, for inviting me. It's very nice to be invited by somebody who also takes action and initiates things. And as I said to you before this talk, that I came in late in the Reiner trial. I only started attending the hearings in June, and there were people before me, especially huge credit should go to Roger Bittel, who, Swiss channel Bittel TV, who was the platform that gave Reiner a voice when his platform was taken away from him. And I think it cannot be underestimated what a difference that made, that he could tell his story somewhere, at least, in Europe, that we could find it. So I came in late, and there have been the people who are in the courtroom with Reiner. Each of them is a gem. They each contribute by investigating stuff, or by having worked with him in the party Die Basis, or they all really contribute, or they were donators, spenders of money. And so when you invited me, I felt a little bit awkward, because there's such an army of people who do fantastic work around Reiner. So just to put that in perspective.
I will say you were one of them. I sent out half a dozen. You answered first, and I am delighted. So, and it hardly matters where I start, but I'm really interested in, and by the way, I'm really delighted it's you. It feels great talking to you. So
thank you. Likewise. Now, to go back to your question about did I save people when I was little or something, I don't think that much. I mean, although we did play, my brother and I, he had a racetrack. And so we would race his cars, but always to help orphan children. But of course, non-existent, but I don't know, I was into catching poachers, because I thought that was a bad thing to do. So my brother and I once went to a forest. We had a friend over, we were 7 and 8. And when my parents were still sleeping, we sneaked out of the house one early Sunday morning, took the bus, and said to the bus driver, we want to go to the forest. Now, we lived in the middle of Utrecht, which is a city. But this was the 70s, and people weren't that worried about what children did at the time. So the bus driver thought, okay, I know a little wood foresty thing place, so I'll drop him there. And so we were there, and we'd taken with us a bread knife and a hook and some rope to catch poachers. And of course, they weren't about at that time that we were in the forest. So we came back. We did find some dove feathers, and we thought that was enough proof that poachers had been present. But that's, the extent of my activity when I was younger. But really what got me started with the case of Reiner was, of course, Corona. Because Reiner's platform, Corona Ausschuss, or Corona Investigative Committee, as it is known to English speakers, was very important for me personally. I was telling you that I had just moved back to Holland and had been away for 18 years. So most of my friends were my student friends, and I hadn't built a network here because I wasn't expecting to come back. And so when Corona hit and all those student friends were on board with the Corona story, I had nobody to check whether I was going nuts or not. You know, I didn't believe the Corona story. I started checking the death rates, you know, the total death rates, and they didn't add up to what the government was saying. And then I started reading tweets by the ex-ambassador of Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, who reported on the Assange case. And I had been wondering, you know, if this is malicious, this Corona story, how can it be? How can they do it? I mean, you can't fool everybody. You can't control, you know, the corruption, or some people will speak out if they know that this is not true. So how do they control it? And then when I learned about, you know, the in-depth details of Julian Assange's case, that they had taken away WikiLeaks, then I understood better, because I thought if WikiLeaks still had been there, then all those contracts of Pfizer, you know, everything would have been leaked because it was safe to leak. You weren't traceable. So then it suddenly made sense that I thought, okay, so this WikiLeaks, he was prosecuted because of what he did, but probably also to prevent WikiLeaks being functional when they wanted to implement the Corona pandemic. So that was one part. The other part was Kathy O'Brien. You know, she was also interviewed by Reiner Fuellmich. She's the MK Ultra victim who was lucky enough to be saved by Mark Phillips, her later husband. And then I understood a little bit about the mind control thing. Then I thought, okay, if they could do that in the 60s, 70s, whatever, then, and if they have advanced since then, I can understand that they can do this on a massive scale. And so while I was trying to search for truth, then I found a Corona Ausschuss, or the Corona Investigative Committee. And I just remember waiting for Fridays to listen to his interviews, to just have a feeling of being sane, you know, like, okay, so I'm not crazy. This makes sense. This makes sense. And so when in 2022, in the summer, it collapsed, or, you know, he was accused of doing something wrong, I initially believed it, because in Holland we had a similar case where we had a sort of Corona Ausschuss platform, and the guy was also accused of things, you know, there were other things that didn't add up, but he was accused of stealing donations. And so it was a sort of reflex, like, oh, here we go again. Now, we still don't know the ins and outs of the Dutch case, because I've gotten interested in that one because of Reiner Fuellmich. You know, I thought, then again, what is actually true and not true in the other case? Although there are more signs that things were not okay, but they need to be investigated. So I initially believed it, but then a friend of mine, she went to Geneva to, she was on the working group with Peter Kruse, Philip Kruse, you know, who were going against the WHO health regulations. You know, they were changing them. I'm now forgetting the words and the names. And so I went with her to Geneva to support her. And then I met Roger Bittel from Bittel TV. And I said, I was very excited to meet him. And I said, oh, by the way, how is it? You know, how is Reiner Fuellmich? And then I heard that all the hearings were already, I think it was the 15th hearing, or I don't know, had just been. And he said the next hearing is on the 10th of June. So I thought, oh my God, I didn't know that, you know, that it had gone on for so long already. So then I immediately went to Göttingen. And that's when I, still with the idea, like, I don't really know, you know, what is true and what is not true. But after the first hearing, I just thought, this just doesn't add up. You know, there are a lot of people around it who told me, who informed me and told me about the witness statement. So I got a little bit of a catch up, so to say. And then I just was interested in the case, because what I find really fascinating is that by now, you know, Reiner sits there with 4 other lawyers, or effectively. Across from him are those 1 or 2 public prosecutors who also studied law. Then there are the 5 judges. So it's the whole judiciary who is fighting in court against each other. It's fascinating. It seems like the implosion of law to me, this case. It started, of course, with this Judge Detmer, who did something for the children. He said that they didn't need to wear the face masks. And then his house was searched and he was searched, and I think he's now in prison. But they took away his license to be a judge, I believe, and they took away his pension, which I find atrocious, because this poor man has worked his whole life as a proper judge and doing well and never having a problem. And he's done one case that the government doesn't like, and he loses his pension for the rest of his,
That is to warn everyone else. Doesn't matter
Sorry?
how good you have been.
Yeah.
This is a warning.
Yeah.
This is about something minor, not like Reiner speaking out week after week, doing all these things. Oh, you don't have to wear masks. Bang, splat, financial ruin,
Yeah.
taking away his pension. And
Yeah.
they really whacked at Reiner financially too, taking away his wife's pension.
Oh, did he? Did they?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well,
Since
she got a pension, but the funds were put into her account she didn't want it done, but then they used that without convicting her of anything, saying, well, we can't give you your pension. Look what you've done. You're a criminal. Or I don't know if they said anything, but anyhow, it meant that she did not have her pension.
and when
So,
was
well, the thing is, when there was fear that all the corona money would be seized, a question was, where do we put this money temporarily?
Mhm.
So to take it out of, you don't want to have bags of dollar bills or euro bills hanging around in shopping bags or wherever they would be kept. It was, we'll just transfer them into her account. And she even said, no, I don't want that. But there was no other place to put it. So they put it in there. I believe this is what I heard. And this was enough, or this is not that they cared. They were just using anything to hit people financially.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah,
was
in
somebody
Reiner's
with
case,
two
not
homes.
only financially, just they're trying to take away his license by
Yeah.
just keeping him in prisons long enough, and then you just have to wait what this imprisonment does to him. It's the ruin of a man, really, psychologically, professionally, financially.
When did you start more than interest? When did you start writing about that? And the way I became aware of you, I saw you in English speaking with Kirsten Heisinger together a couple of times. And it was really great because almost everything coming directly from the courthouse was, of course, in German. Und ich spreche doch Deutsch. But my audience is virtually all English. So it was delightful seeing the two of you, not in your native language, being willing to speak to us, say what you saw to an English audience. So I sent anything I found from the two of you out to everyone. But how did you move into, being not just a listener, but reaching for an audience?
Well, I had already started reporting on the Assange case. I think in 2021 I started, because I was very embarrassed that in Holland, nobody, no mainstream media, but I don't think any, apart from one guy I know who reported on it in 2020 once, nobody else did it. And I thought, it can't be that, tolerant, free-thinking Holland is not reporting on the Assange case. So because of Corona, the hearings at first were online. So I signed up to be, listening in online. And then later I went to the courthouse in London. So I went a couple of times to the magistrates court and the High Court. So yeah, I was busy with that. And then of course, Assange got out. And that sort of came, I went to Reiner before Assange got out, but it was sort of a new thing to take on then. Yeah.
And what did you do first? How often did you do it? Was it all written? How much was video? Because I got to know you through video.
Yeah. Well, I started tweeting about it. I think Twitter was my first medium. I went to the courts in London, just live tweeting from the court in Dutch, because there was nothing Dutch in Dutch language. And so with Reiner, unfortunately, I couldn't do that because they won't allow you to take your laptop in, which is a real shame, because it's quite nice to stay as close to what is said so that people, you sort of have a historical document is how I see it, even though it's very fragmented, but you can piece it together. Um, but yeah, I'm a bit disorganized. I have a website called Pinch of Suit. I have a YouTube channel, but I haven't really connected the two very well. I have my Twitter account, so that's something I really need to do, is to connect everything together. So people who follow me on Twitter follow my messages on Twitter, and I do post my articles on Twitter. Then I try to remember that I should put them on Facebook or on LinkedIn, but yeah, life gets so full, you're running and running, and I forget to then organize stuff.
I find it is really something to try to do all of these things. So since I only know a little tiny part of you, I don't know how it all connects. And I think, yes, we're not superhuman. So I never knew that you had a Twitter account, for instance. So, and there is that thing that I heard so much, nothing is available here, nothing is available there. I know somebody who does in Italian. So in her case, she does it through Facebook, so that she posts things through Facebook. And I think that she lost 3 or 4 Facebook accounts through posting on the pandemic. And then now on Reiner, she is being allowed. But that again is another audience, because that audience is not German, is not English, is not Dutch, that you need somebody motivated, comfortable in that language, reaching that audience. So I went and when I started, there was nothing in English. So I went, and not the Corona Committee, there are loads and loads of people talking about masks and pandemic. And, there's a huge English interest, but there was nobody who was doing Reiner after his arrest. Before the arrest, his videos went out, on Odyssey, on Rumble, on YouTube, so he was visible. It was with the arrest that there was such silence. And in fact, what I heard over and over again is so few people took it over. And you almost need an army of people to go and broadcast it. You need more than one person in Italian. You need more than one person Dutch. I went and I did the English side on Substack, but I wasn't doing video because I really like writing, because one reads so much faster. So what I would do is I would take things from German and I might DeepL translate, etc. So, but there was such a dearth. And at one point I went and I got some interviews, but the people who interviewed me, they'd all cared about Reiner. A couple had been interviewed by Reiner, but he had dropped from sight and their lives were overwhelmingly busy. So it was, oh my God, yes. How is Reiner? Oh, we love Reiner. Yes, but they didn't day to day connect with him because there was no one in their environment putting that information in. So again, by speaking once, it touched people lightly, but it would have really needed somebody who took it on in their area. And so I'm seeing that you were one of those people. Now that Reiner has been sentenced, I don't know what I will be doing. Do you have any idea what you will be doing now that he has been sentenced?
Oh, but this is only the beginning. I mean, because there will be an appeal. He will appeal the decision for sure. And then, of course, there's the second case, the 16 charges that they have admitted, even though they had been rejected 3 times before. So and that will be an interesting period, because it will be very hard on the lawyers. If the lawyers still are the same, you don't know if they want to continue doing it, or, life has its ways. But if these lawyers continue, this was hard already, a year long, almost every week, sometimes twice a week. It's well, it was a marathon. Even to be there as a reporter or as an audience, it was a lot. Now, if they have to appeal and do the second case, if that overlaps in time, I mean, I can't imagine what, then you have to do two trajectories and plans the hearings. I don't know how that's going to work out. So that's going to, as from a reporter's perspective, it's going to be a very interesting time. From a lawyer's perspective, it seems like hell to me. But yeah, and for Reiner, it's very intense as well, because he'll have to prepare. He prepares his cases, like he said, he never prepared a case as well as his own. So he'll have to do that twice as hard.
I don't know what I will do. I have no idea, because I've been doing updates. In other words, I'm not just saying he's feeling like this or et cetera. There have been things to report. This court date, the next court date, the cancellations, his illness, solitary confinement. So that I've been reporting on things. Aside from that, I have another person I've been following and paying attention to his case, Ed Wakerman, who was imprisoned for allegedly setting a fire that was set by directed energy. In other words, he could not have done it. And then I have my own things. I love ideas and I love creative things. So among all this, I've been posting on Reiner. Right now, I don't know what the next thing will be. Katja, as a lawyer, well, that's been since since October 13th or 15th, since they opened the thing. She was writing briefs when she was not the main lawyer. Then she became the main lawyer. So from October until May, or April 24th, that was over a year and a half, getting, more than a year and a half, 19 months. So I don't know what she will be doing. So again, and I don't know what I will be doing, because I don't know what there will be for me to do. Because for instance, I love interviewing people like you. Reiner is virtually inaccessible. He can, in a phone conversation, I could send questions to Katja and she could get them, but that's not the same thing like being able to talk to you. So I just question to you is, but what I hear from you is you imagine staying connected with this case as it goes on.
Oh, yes. I'm just waiting to hear when the next things are scheduled. Meanwhile, I'm very busy like you with other cases. But we've also sent a letter with a couple of people. I think Vera Sharaf signed it and Jason Christoph, and to the UN rapporteur for torture, the one who, Niels Meltzer, did it for Julian Assange. And so Miss Edwards is his successor. So she's fine. Well, not finally. We found another way to reach her, because the way we chose, somehow we didn't get a confirmation of receipt, but now we have that. So yeah, hopefully that will do something. I think what you said was, we need an army of people. That's true. What I find hopeful, though, is that if you have one person in a language, that already has a massive effect, like the Italian woman, like Kerstin Heusinger, who is doing it for the French-speaking area, and then there's Laufpass, of course, and Roger Bedell, who are doing it for Germany and then Switzerland. There's Alf Eins, that is then more Austrian, but that's all German. But if we could maybe in this time that nothing much is happening in terms of hearings, if we could find ways to reach people in Poland or other languages, maybe that's an idea. If somebody knows someone in Denmark, or it's a matter of getting the court of public opinion in action. And that always helps. There was this one lawyer that was Assange's lawyer for a while until he died in 2016. What's his name? Michael Ratner. And he said that he couldn't win a case, a political case, unless he had the public opinion behind him. Because governments don't like it when they become very unpopular, So that's the thing. He won't win in court. That's for sure. We've seen that. The court, the judicial system, but in Holland, in Germany, it's all broken. not for ordinary cases. You know, if you go and fight your employer for a wrong payment or whatever, that still works. But if it's a citizen against the state, then you can forget it for justice. So you have to do this procedure in court, of course, because that's the only road open to Reiner. But in the meantime, people like us and people listening to this program should think, you know, how can I reach somebody in another language or maybe in another area of the country or whatever, you know, and it just takes one person with a bit of, you know, even a Facebook page that has some tracking or whatever. It doesn't, you don't need to be Tucker Carlson to get things moving.
Yeah, the person in the Italian side said she started with something like 300 friends, and then when she started posting, within about 10 days, she had 450 friends all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So that it's one person who cared about Reiner who passed on her thing, and then it kept going. So I really like the idea of just one person in a language. So if you speak Romanian, Polish, Czech, Hungarian, Estonian, Latvian, I'm just thinking of European languages. A lot of the rest of the world speaks English, so my stuff can go for Australia, New Zealand, etc. But if there's somebody local, tying it to the local situation. But yes, I really love this point you're making about how important one person can be. And this doesn't need to be a lot, like the Italian person can just take posts that are coming out in Germany or wherever it is and pass them along. And yeah, because I couldn't generate anything myself. I mean, I got a couple of messages back from Reiner because I sent questions and I asked them, and I did get answers, which was wonderful. But most of the time it was what happened on court day 32, 33, 34. I went and I checked afterwards, and sometimes one person posted right away, some person another. Then when Claudia started her court reports, I found out how you could Google auto translate. So there didn't need to be a translation before that. I don't know if I hadn't known it or whatever. Anyhow, so it was a learning for me as well. How do I get the message out? So would you like to say?
Everything works. I mean, I think the Assange case is interesting because you can learn from it. You know, so what was very successful there was a variety of initiatives. So not only reporting, there was, what's his name, David Rovics, or I think Rovics for sure, but I'm not sure about the David. So he wrote a couple of songs on Assange, which, you know, again, reached another audience apart from the Assange supporters group already, but it went broader than that. And then there was an event, a rally in Brussels, for example, where an Italian dance group did a really emotional, it was about typing and reporting, and it was on very fast music. And I was at that square in Brussels, and I was sort of, there were first speeches. So we were listening to the speeches, and all of a sudden I heard this voice, but it wasn't a speaker, it just came out of the, you know, the speakers. And I thought, I know this voice, I know this voice. And then the music started, and then we saw the dance group. And of course, I knew this voice because it was Assange's own voice that was coming through the speakers. And he was giving a speech he'd given at one time, and it was mixed with the music. And to that, they were dancing. And at the end, they just stood on chairs. And Stella Assange was there, and she was totally blown away and emotional. But everybody, I mean, the whole square was in tears, and it was without words. You know, there was nothing really literally sentimental, but just to hear his voice, to see this dance, all these people together, I'll never forget that, you know, that was amazing. Then there was a guy from New Zealand. He's called Matt. He was in New Zealand when he posted this idea, and he said, what about if we do a chain around the prison? You know, a human chain. We all hold hands, and then we just make a chain around the prison. Well, it turned out that wasn't, first everybody thought, yeah, you know, that's far out. But then people started calculating how many people would you need and how would we do it? And then it turned out, well, Belmarsh prison wasn't ideal, but what about the Houses of Parliament? Well, that's, you know, bigger. And so in the end, it did happen. Like 5,000, more than 5,000 people made a chain all around the Houses of Parliament, over the bridges, along the other side of the House of Parliament and back. And then there was this carnival. Somebody organized a carnival, like a Brazilian carnival. People were dressed up as Lady Justice or as judges, but also just wacky costumes. So there was a parade from the courthouse to, I think, the Houses of Parliament again. And somewhere around that time, I had the feeling the genie is out of the bottle. They cannot stop this anymore. The momentum it was gaining so much momentum, and it was getting so creative that, of course, we're nowhere near that with the Fuellmich case. But this was, of course, after Assange was away from the public eye for 12 years already, or 10, at least 10 years. So we'd hope to not wait that long with Reiner. But it just means it doesn't all have to be reporting. You don't have to do Facebook. You can, whatever you're good at, or what, where you have influence, you can use that. There was one guy who was a designer, for example, and he designed a website where everybody could get posters, stickers, all made. You could download them for free and then send them to a printer. Then you had to pay for the printing, of course, but at least you had the, all the slogans, all the photos of Assange. And then, of course, Assange had a campaign team. So maybe that is something to think about, that a couple of people should get together and think, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with the press? What are we going to do with the justice system? More strategic, because now, up till now, everything has been sort of on Katja's shoulders. She's looked after Reiner to give him messages, but also to give him stuff, together with another lady called Andrea, who's also like one of the heroes. And she's had so many balls in her court to handle, but it would be helpful if the lawyers could be supported by a campaign team. In Assange's case, the lawyers never really talked to the public. Jennifer Robinson, her name was, she did, but only very limited. But the actual lawyers in the court, what was her name again? God, my brain is not functioning today. Anyway, she was brilliant, but she never interacted with, she kept to herself, and she did all the strategy and whatever together with the people who actually stood there and did the pleas. But that was a very good division, because they could stay neutral. They could just stick to the facts and do their own work. And whatever they needed to communicate to the campaign team, they did. So the campaign team then was just focused on doing every avenue, trying to get speaking time in the European Parliament. Everything that was possible.
I so much hope we don't need this.
Yeah.
That somehow or other Reiner gets free. On the other hand, I think it's so important to make these plans. And I loved hearing all of these things that could be done. There's the spontaneous birthday, over 400 people came.
Yeah. And the people who stand there every week, there are people there every week. Standing there to make the public aware. They're standing on a roundabout, and it's a busy, so lots of people see their signs. Everybody has something to contribute and is valuable, because the lawyers cannot stand on that road and cannot. But that might be not equally effective, but it will reach a lot of people. And you say, I hope we don't need it. I think the contrary. I think the minute if we got this all
there in the millions, yes.
Yeah, then he wouldn't have the second case would be blown out the window and the appeal would go nowhere. I think the sooner we started, the better.
Absolutely. I'm totally with you. There's just the little optimistic child in me that says, they have to let him go. They have to let him go. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, they do have to, but they don't.
They don't. They will only let it go if it gets too hot and too uncomfortable for them. And that is only what we can do.
Mhm. Is there any other message you'd like to leave people with?
Um, no, I think I've said it already. You know, any drop you can contribute, even if you don't know what to share as many messages or to talk to people about it, to write to Reiner, of course, that's very good. But also think, you know, what if it were you in prison? Then you would also want other people to do something, you know, even if it's if you think it's little. But then I never knew I was going to reach people here in Holland. You know, the first demonstration or protest I organized for Assange was here at the American embassy, and I was there all
Wonderful.
by myself. Nobody came. But then, you know, it somehow gets traction,
Yeah, you
and
stuck with it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you're coming to the things with Reiner with all of the stuff you've done for Julian under your belt.
Yeah.
And, you know, realizing I did it, I was the only person, but I was there. And I
Well, I
went
wasn't
back.
the only person. I wasn't at that time the only person in Holland, but of course, there were, you know, fantastic reporters in the Assange case that I really clung to. You know, when they were live tweeting when I wasn't reporting yet, I was working in this studio, and of course, I couldn't watch the interviews and stuff, but I was hanging on to those tweets, like, what is happening now? What's happening now? What's being said? And so that's what I'm trying to do. I report mainly on court cases. So when I live tweet, I just hope there's somebody out there like me who's really happy that at least they can read the tweet if they can't see whatever. Yeah.
I am so glad, just a moment, let me get both of us. And that both of us, because I just had you large so people could really
Oh,
see you better than seeing me listening to you. I want to thank you for coming on. I think that one of the things that an interview can do is maybe motivate other people a little more. Like, you know, you watch this and you see, okay, she just fell into it accidentally. And she went with it and she went further and further. In addition, you have all these wonderful things to think of, including, are you in some pocket where there's nobody speaking out? Are you in an area where basically it's you in that town? Oh, and I'll say there's one thing I thought of. If anyone is a teacher of little kids, I'm sure you could bring it to the classroom, a little story on Reiner to the 6-year-olds or the 7-year-olds. I mean, it's the kind of story that children love, isn't it? I mean, they don't love it that he's still in prison, but they could all write a letter to him.
yeah, yeah. And also, I think maybe that's one thing I could say. What I would think is really needed, but it takes a lot of time and some IT expertise, which I don't have very much. But I would love it if people would make tweetable clips or, you know, short clips of the interviews Reiner did. You know, just things that sort of were catchy phrases or important snippets of information so that his work gets rotated and not so much the long interviews because a lot of people will find it too long to listen to, but just, you know, yeah. We used to do that. I work together with a man here in Holland who has filmed over 100 court cases during the Corona time. So they were all to do with fighting the government on Corona issues.
Mhm.
And what we did in the beginning is take all the fragments that were really exposing the ludicrousy of the statements of the arguments of the state or the you know the points the lawyers for the citizens were going to make, and they were very popular. And but of course we had the film material ourselves, so it was easy to do. And I don't really know how to do it with the interviews on ICIC law or because Corona Ausschuss is of course off limits, I would assume. Maybe, I don't know.
Everything is mirrored everywhere. All the interviews he did, you can find them on Rumble, on Odyssey, on
Yeah,
BitChute, and there are
that's
ways, I don't, that's not technology, I know, but there are ways of taking clips, the same way as
yeah,
people take snippets. So it's
yeah,
somebody with the tech knowledge if they're watching a video clip and they really like a bit, to go, oh, I think I will, but that's another idea. So thank you for that idea as well. And if we don't have enough, there are
Yeah.
all of those, whether it's, if you have children or grandchildren, tell them the story and have them write a letter to Reiner.
Yeah. Yeah, write to people. I'd write to your politicians, like how come
Yeah.
we're not saying anything about it?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Send pictures, spread it if you have a little local newspaper, that's in your area. It's just like, yeah, be creative, think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
okay,
And you mentioned Arne, for example. I mean, Arne is fantastic. He has this
pianist,
portable piano. Yeah.
yeah.
And he takes it and he puts it on the square and he puts a little poster of Reiner on the front and he just plays. And then he stands up and he gives a short speech to tell people about Reiner Fuellmich and then he plays again. I mean, those kind of things are so unique and wonderful. It's yeah, it's contagious. Julian Assange always said courage is contagious. So, if you do one brave act that you think, oh my God, I'm making a complete fool of myself, which I thought in the beginning, at a certain point, you don't care anymore. It's not about looking good or it's just getting somebody out of jail who shouldn't be there.
I completely agree. So with that, I want to thank you for being here. And
Thank
I
you.
hope this inspires a lot of people. And well, and I just have a big thank you for you.
Well, thank you, Elsa, for inviting me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.